Welcome back to another live stream, guys. Nick here, talking science of endurance and everything sports science in general. Looking forward to kicking off another live stream Q&A tonight, getting your questions in, answering them, helping you guys out along the way. Hoping to tap into some great discussions as we've been having over the past weeks. And since we've started these live streams, we've sort of done almost 2 months worth of these live streams now, even a little bit more. So we've been running them for a little while and really enjoying the content that's been coming out of them. Hopefully you've been getting a bit out of them as well. As always, make sure your questions get in the chat. Send them in. Members do get priority, so if you do have that little membership badge next to your name, you will get a priority in the chat. We'll get to your questions first when they do come in, but then if you aren't a member and you do want to join up so you can have some of that priority, but also just to support the channel above and beyond subscribing and sharing the videos and building this great community, you can hit the join button down below. That'll take you to the membership for less than a coffee a month. You can help support this channel, continue to grow what we've got here, help me invest in some new equipment, some new stuff to make the videos. Also allow me to spend a little bit more time on videos rather than having to sort of make up the rest of the time from work and things like that. It takes a little bit of pressure and stress off that aspect. But by no means is that compulsory. It is something that I really would appreciate. And we have grown to 7 members now. I just had a quick look before, and hence the green behind me tonight in sort of, I guess, support of the members who have joined up. You get a little green badge to your name in the first month. We do have a number of people who have joined up and have the green badge. We have a couple who have actually progressed through to the second badge after being a member for more than a month, which is absolutely awesome to see them staying on and continuing to support the channel. But it does definitely help. Any little bit to help this channel grow is great. But also we're going to bring in some new perks. So once we do get to 10, I'm going to be dropping the first additional perk to the membership. Which I've got a couple of things in the works at the moment that I'm looking at that could be that next thing. What that is, we'll wait until we do get to 10. So if we can get a couple more, it's going to come a little bit sooner rather than later. So hopefully we can bring that to you nice and soon. But first thing I wanted to just address, particularly for those who are on the live stream watching, and maybe if you're watching this later on, if you have joined us live as we go, but you've missed the beginning here, something I wanted to show, if I just quickly do a bit of a my channel. You might have seen this week and end of last week, Friday and Monday and Tuesday as well. You would have seen some new videos up on the channel talking about the data behind our physiology and endurance performance. So that's all put up here. I've got a playlist that I'm going to be running over the next couple of weeks, continuing to build out this series of content, looking at the data behind endurance performance, looking at lab testing, having a look at what's going on. It's called the little series that we got here from the lab inside the data of performance. It's every video that has to do with the breaking down the data, where I'm screen sharing, talking you through the graphs, talking you through the numbers, will be put into this playlist. This is going to be a little bit slow because I am trying to stream and stream at the moment, have the monitor up, but then also try to upload it or have a look at a video as well is also going to make it a little bit slow. But you get the general idea. It'll bring it all up into a playlist. You can click through the different ones that you want to watch. I'm trying to do them a bit of a progressive order as well. As you would have noticed, we started with the breathing side of things and we moved into heart rate, cardiovascular. Yesterday's video was all about how well we use oxygen, fraction of expired oxygen. Hopefully you all enjoyed that one and got something out of that video as well. And then we're going to progressively move through some other things: lactate threshold, blood lactate readings. What is our VT1, VT2 ventilatory thresholds, and lactate LT1, LT2, those types of things as well are also what we're going to be moving into. So go check those ones out. Make sure you jump into that playlist there, and I'll keep it nice and easy to find. I might actually try and add it to the home page of my channel as well. So if you are looking for it, it'll be nice and easy to see there. But yeah, that series is going to be built out over the next couple of weeks or so, just looking right in depth into the data. If there's anything in particular you want me to cover talking about the data, send it through. Let me know. Are there any particular things that you've seen in the data I want me to cover again? Is there anything you want me to go in more detail on? Let me know, because always happy to make the content that is most specific to what people are looking for and what people need. So, without further ado, we're getting into some of the questions tonight as we get a few more people joining us. Hopefully, we can see some of those questions come through. I'm just going to move a couple of things so I can see who's or how many are in with us tonight. Will's got the first one. Will, welcome back to the stream as always. Bit of a left of field question here, but we'll cover it anyway. Who would win in a one-on-one basketball game? Michael Jordan or Lavar Ball? I think we all know the answer to that. For those of you on our channel who don't actually follow basketball and things like that, Lavar Ball's son just got drafted to Michael Jordan's team. Bit of a feud between those two. Michael Jordan would absolutely towel up Lavar Ball on a basketball court. Not necessarily an endurance question there, but I think from a physiology perspective, if we can bring it back to the endurance and sports science, I think Michael Jordan far would outperform Lavar Ball if we're looking at them in their prime in particular, in terms of the physiological side of things, the endurance capacity, all of that. But then also, I mean, we're talking arguably one of the greatest players of all time versus a guy who just talks a lot. So I think in that respect, we'd have to go with Michael Jordan. Let me know what you think as well. A little bit of a different one to start, but always interesting to talk about some different topics. Obviously, this channel isn't necessarily just exclusively endurance. We do talk predominantly about endurance because that's what I'm most interested in, what I'm working in, and the space that most of you are interested in as well watching. But we do talk team sport. We have had some great questions about conditioning for soccer before. We've had some questioning about other team sports come through on the channel, some content around that. It's the type of thing that we do talk about some other topics outside of just endurance. So feel free to send those questions through with what you're interested in. We do try and keep it sports science related though as best we can. So bring it most of the time back to sports science or science of endurance specifically. But things to do with performance is mainly where we want to stick. I've seen we'll just put another one in there, Scalabrine versus Lavar. I think that'd be an interesting battle. For those of you who don't know, Brian Scalabrine, arguably the greatest bench player of all time, didn't really get off the bench. Is why he's the greatest bench player, spent the most minutes there. But I reckon that'd be an interesting battle. I don't know who'd win. You'd almost maybe argue that Lavar Ball might have him covered, but I don't know who'd win that one. That'd be a more interesting battle than the Michael Jordan battle. I think Jordan would have majority of people covered, even though he's a little bit older now. I think that's kind of a losing battle regardless of who you are. Interesting way to start tonight. A little bit of a different one. I'm going to try and keep tonight a little bit shorter as well because I know we started a little bit late, 7:15. Hopefully see a few people start to drop in if they've just discovered through Instagram that we are a little bit later tonight and we weren't 7. I did have a online call sorting out everything for the 2021 season in terms of my umpiring commitments. So need to make sure I was all across what was going on with there. There's like contract sort of talk and things like that around how we're going to be working through that season. So need to make sure I was a part of that. But so hence for a little bit of delay, had to get some dinner in as well. But we are good to go. But I might try to keep it. We might sort of try to wrap things up about 8:15 tonight. Keep it a little bit shorter, just purely because I do have a couple of things to get to outside of that as well. Looking forward to some more questions coming through. When you join us here, make sure you get your questions in. Happy to answer them. As I said before, had some great content recently about the data of endurance. So if you do have any questions around the data side of things or anything we talked about in those videos specifically, happy to answer them. Happy to take sort of some questions on those videos, or if there's a suggestion for what's coming in the next little while. What I might do in the meantime is just talk about some ideas around the data anyway, and some of those concepts we did cover in those videos. If you haven't seen them, make sure you do go check them out. The full videos are obviously up on the channel, but selective playlist of those videos is put together just so you can find them a little bit easier. All about the data. But in that first one, we talked about the respiratory responses to exercise. So as exercise intensity increases, what happens to our breathing? Primarily, we take in deeper breaths first and foremost, so our tidal volume increases, and then we start to see, towards the end of the test, we start to see our respiratory rate rise quite rapidly as a result of, at some point, you can only take in so much air per breath, so we have to breathe more frequently. We see ventilation as a whole, so that total amount of air we can breathe in per minute start to really go up quite quickly towards the end because we're breathing a lot faster. But again, that's one part of the equation. It's all very well to have a high ventilation. I think in the data they showed, I sort of got up to 160, 170 litres of ventilation, getting up there. But if I can't transport the oxygen out of that through the cardiovascular system and I can't use it in terms of the working muscle, it's not really going to do a lot for me. So looking at that heart rate response was our second video, talking about what happens as exercise intensity increases. Heart rate typically is pretty linear. It increases as exercise intensity increases quite evenly. It's the type of thing that everyone's quite different in terms of how much it increases or where it gets to. What is the highest point? I can get my heart rate at a maximal level, pushing as hard as I can to sort of high 190s, 200s. On the bike, I can sort of get to low to mid 190 beats per minute. At a VO2 max though, I only hit about 187, I think, from memory on the bike, because that's my maximal oxygen consumption heart rate, and that's where I sort of finish the test. If I was to do an anaerobic sprint type effort, I could get it past. And that's that important distinction between VO2 max heart rate and maximum heart rate we need to make sure we are conscious of. They are two different things. Your heart rate at your maximal oxygen consumption, your VO2 max heart rate, shouldn't be your highest the highest heart rate you can get to, because the body's just going to continue to go up to try and compensate with that anaerobic response coming through towards the end. So keep that in mind. They are two different things. And so when you are looking at percentages in terms of working out training zones, if you're using a percentage heart rate system to work out a percentage, maybe 60% of heart rate max, that is a different heart rate to the heart rate that we would get at the end of a VO2 max test, because we're talking about percentage of VO2 rather than percentage of heart rate max. So keep that in mind as well. It's one of the things I'm going to talk about in the future when we talk about training zones and how I'm finding training zones in the data and analyzing data to get that type of info. I want you to be sure that we're looking at it in those terms. I'll be nice and clear when we are talking about that. Obviously, the final video is then more touching on how we use oxygen. So FeO2, that fraction of expired oxygen metric that's telling us how much oxygen we're actually using at the working muscle and how much we are using in the system as a whole, which is really one of our key ones. And I almost argue that's the most important metric I look at when I am looking at data in the lab is, well, most people are pretty good at taking and transporting, but their muscles just aren't able to use it. How can we target that specifically through training, whether it be high intensity, low intensity, whatever it might be, a combination of both, to be able to get that improved response, increase our VO2, sure, but increase our ability to be aerobic rather than having to tap in the anaerobic a little bit early. So go check those ones out if you haven't. Hopefully you enjoy them. I think they're going to be a really good series. I had some great feedback on it so far, particularly in the comments. Heard some really good things so far. So some good discussion coming out of those. I'm looking forward to building that series out a little bit more and getting more into the data. But like I said before, any data you want me to touch on or look at, even if it's something that I don't necessarily have a hold of, like whether it's power data, looking at like a power curve, whatever it might be, even if you want to send it, if you're happy to send it through, I can make it anonymous. If you want me to look at some of your data and analyze it, break it down as a video, happy to do that as well. So that series is going to be diving more into me screen sharing, looking at the data, talking you through it as I look at it in front of me, and show the patterns of progressions. I guess my thought process behind what am I looking for when I am analyzing some of that data. Because I know it's a big thing. We have more access to data as athletes and as coaches now, but it's the type of thing that if you can't interpret it, then that's obviously the important part that's missing in the whole process. So go check those videos out. Definitely recommend them, and looking forward to the rest of that series as we come. Got another question coming through, so we'll get to this one now. I'll bring it up on the screen here. Why, and this one, just having a look at it quickly now before I read it out, seems to be stemming from a bit of a conversation around detraining. So what we've got here is, why is heart rate higher after taking a training break? For example, 1 to 5 days of rest, heart rate will be a lot higher. I'm assuming in that next session is where you're talking, and let me know with some clarification in the chat there if I'm on the right track. But typically when we take a training break, there's going to be some sort of detraining. It's inevitable. If we don't maintain that usage of the pathways and the infrastructure within our system to be able to use oxygen and be able to pump things around the system, of course we're going to see a little bit of detraining. That's like anything. You take some time off. It takes a bit to get back into where you were. We can lose things quite quickly. In the space of 1 to 5 days, we're probably not going to lose massive. We'll start that process, but really after sort of 10 days is where we see the big impact of detraining. After 10 days, if you train for say 12 weeks, you did nothing for 10 days, you could pretty much get yourself back to zero, back to that initial starting point at the beginning of that 12-week period by doing nothing. Things go reverse, or process of reversibility, so we're actually going backwards a lot quicker than we adapt and we build them. Why is it higher? Typically because that detraining effect is going to, at the end of the day, the heart is a muscle. So if we're not training it, similar to, I use the example of like your biceps, for example. If you're doing heaps of bicep curls for 6 months, you're going to see some size development in the muscle. But as soon as you stop that program, after a couple of weeks, you're going to start to see that muscle size start to reduce. Why? Because it doesn't have that stimulus to continue to grow more and more and more. That's basically what the heart is doing. The heart is a muscle at the end of the day. As much as it's cardiac muscle, not skeletal, it is still going to go under that hypertrophy and what we call atrophy. So atrophy is the reduction in muscle size as a result of not receiving that stimulus. So what does that look like? Well, endurance training as a whole, we increase the size of the left ventricle. We've talked about this before as an adaptation. That stroke volume video I did a few weeks ago. Increase the size of the left ventricle so we can pump more blood per beat. We increase how forcefully it can contract so we can also pump more blood per beat. Basically, we reduce the left ventricle thickness, or the thickness of the wall, so we can't pump as forcefully, and it starts to shrink a bit because the muscle's a little bit smaller because it's not getting that training stimulus. As a whole, what does that mean? Heart rate, we can't pump out as much blood per beat, so heart rate's going to go up for the same cardiac output, for the same circulation of blood around the system total. We actually have to pump more frequently because the heart's not as big anymore. We go away, we train again, we begin that training process again, go through 10, 12 weeks of training, things start to go back to where they were, heart rate starts to drop. So we're always going to hit these, I guess, peaks and lulls in terms of our training anyway, whether we go from an in-season to an off-season period, whether we go from, if you're a team sport athlete, a pre-season to an in-season, we might see some change or a bit of detraining there because it's more about maintenance rather than trying to continue to increase. Typically for the endurance athlete, we'll see it a lot when they do their major event for the year or for the training block. They have some time off, like you've said, maybe 5 days or even 10 days. We start to see an initial period. The shorter that period, though, like if you're only taking 2 to 3 days off, probably not going to see massive amount of change. Maybe that immediate session, there's a little bit of detraining there, but it's not much. You'll sort of bounce back. We'll take 1 or 2 sessions and you're back to normal. 5 to 8 days, we might see a bit more detraining, and that sort of 8 to 10 really. Like I said before, 10 days, we'll see some significant detraining if you're not doing anything in that time. And what I would recommend to, I guess, prevent that is just do something. Something is better than nothing. Ideally, the best way to maintain, though, would be to try and add in just a short, sharp, high-intensity session to make sure the heart's working up near maximal, just for a short period. It doesn't have to be long. Maybe you do. If you had a big block, you've had a big weekend of training, and you're taking some time off, or you've got a race and you want to try and take 5 or so days off. I think I've just seen in the follow-up part there, did 4 days off to get a niggle in the foot to calm down, and now I feel much worse. It's the type of thing that maybe it's a case of if we're talking running in this circumstance, if it's a running-based injury, maybe try and jump on the bike or do some cross-training in the pool, something different where you can still get that heart working. So cardiovascular-wise, we're maintaining some of that adaptation. It's not the specific stimulus of running, but it's what it's going to help is help prevent any decline, so to speak. We just kind of maintain that. So when you can come back into running, things are going to be a little bit better off, and maybe we only drop a little bit rather than dropping a big amount. As you mentioned as well, it seems unfair that because you take a short period of time out, you might only take a couple of days and things start to go backwards. It does seem a bit unfair, but that's the nature of the body, and that's why it's so important to maintain some stimulus into the system. And that's why I say in that period, like if you could jump on the bike instead of going running to try and help calm that niggle in the foot down, because the bike is less stressful. If you can just do some short efforts, maybe it's just some 30 on, 30 off. You might do that 5 or 6 times and then have a bit of a break, do it again, or maybe 3 2-minute on, 2-minute off, just working hard, just so you can get the heart rate up there. That's going to maintain in that period. And you might only have to, if you take 4 days off, you do one of those sessions and you actually maintain as much of that, or you reduce the amount that it declines by, that detraining by, quite significantly, just because you've kept the body under some sort of stimulus. Doing nothing is the easy way to see heart rate start to skyrocket and go back through the roof. So we really want to sort of avoid that at all costs, or as best we can, try to avoid as much of that detraining effect as possible. Just got another one here from Tony. He's just saying, I'll just wait for it to come up on my screen so I can bring it up. But should see mine after 5 weeks off for collarbone surgery, 197 beats per minute in zone 1. That's going to do it. I mean, particularly if you're spending a lot of time I'll bring you up here on the screen now. If you're spending a lot of time out, if you're spending particularly, I'm assuming here based on your profile picture, cyclist, spending a lot of time off the bike, significant periods of time, and 5 weeks, for example, you're going to see a big detraining effect. Very easy to see that heart rate just go through the roof when you come back. Absolutely pretty sort of normal for what we would expect. Not uncommon at all, because that detraining can happen very, very quickly. It always could be worse. You're saying in there as well. Yeah, it definitely could be worse. I mean, the longer you take off, the harder it is to get back. And it's just that nature of the dynamic. I mean, things adapt quite slowly and progressively, then they disappear quite quickly. You use it or lose it is the classic phrase, but really it holds quite true. The more time you spend away from it, the easier it is, or the quicker it is in terms of that rate of decline. We're kind of back to square one. Frustrating, I know. A lot of athletes go through it. I've gone through periods of it. That's the importance as well of keeping on top of training, making sure in those periods we are maintaining something. I think it's a big one through lockdown, and I might even just sort of change a bit of focus here rather than just short periods of detraining. But through lockdown, throughout COVID and this year, a lot of athletes sort of stripped back how much training they were doing. And a big mistake that I saw a lot of athletes make when they've now since come back into retest is they've dropped out all the high intensity. They've just gone away and gone, I'll just do some base Ks, keep things ticking along, not put the stress on me to continue that. And sure, that might be fine for a short block, but taking the high intensity out for too long, or taking it out of the program completely. And what I mean by that is removing all of it and just going along slow, I don't think is the right approach to go about your training in any phase. Purely from the fact that that's where most of the significant drop is going to come from, the top end. we need that high intensity stimulus in any capacity to maintain as much of the top end of our engine as possible. You strip that back, and of course the body's just going to decline because it feels like it doesn't need that anymore. That's the big mistake a lot of athletes make in a taper period too. They go and they instead of cutting volume in half or reducing how much work they're doing, they either maintain it or they drop everything. They drop the volume and they drop the intensity. So they just go out and do a couple of long, slow sessions, and they wonder why when they get to race day they feel flat. Because the top end of the engine has gone through detraining. You've maintained the long, slow. You're on a race day. No wonder you don't have any speed in the legs or power in the legs because you haven't maintained that intensity. Best practice in a taper period or in those off-season blocks or in a block where you're taking the total stress out of the training, you might be doing less training. Best thing to do is keep 1 to 2 high intensity sessions in the week. They just need to be short and sharp. Doesn't have to be a big, hard, high intensity session. You might do 5 by 2 minute on, 2 minute off. You might do 4 by 2 minute on, 2 minute off. Anything is better than nothing. Really just to keep a little bit of that in there. It's just enough of a stimulus so that the body doesn't start to go through that detraining process, really starts to maintain a lot of that adaptation. So I've gone a little bit of on a side path there, and when I do the replay later, I might split those into 2 different topics because I know that the taper and the adjusting training strategy is a little bit different to what we talked about. But detraining and that aspect of maintenance of that part of your engine kind of work in hand. That's the easy reason why it drops is it's largely due to that high intensity stimulus not being there to keep the upper end of the engine just ticking along and working as it should be. So great question there, really good point, because a lot of people go through that. You pick up a niggle through a big session on the weekend or an event, you pick up a little niggle, hamstring type thing, calf, Achilles, foot, whatever it might be. You then feel like you want to take some days off. You can't really afford to take too much time off because, you're going to start to go through detraining. Keeping something in there, maybe you move to, if you're a runner and you've got a running-based sort of niggle that you don't want to go out and aggravate anymore, jump on the bike for a bit, do a short, sharp session on the bike, go to the pool and do some work there. Do some running in the water might be a good way to deload the leg and still get the heart rate up there because that's obviously adding a different resistance. There's a number of things you can do to get that maintenance, but ideally, if you're able to continue to run, the ideal would be go out and run. If you're just feeling a bit tired, go and do some strides, just some stride throughs, easy, a bit of a warm up, and then just go through and work your way through 15, 30 second little bursts with plenty of recovery. Do 30 seconds of striding through to near maximal intensity, and then do like a minute and a half recovery, even if you wanted to, just so you've got things up there. Get heart rate up there, get all the acute responses happening, get that oxygen consumption in, and that's going to give the body enough stimulus just to maintain, and then we should be good to go from there. So great point you both touched on there. Interesting to see some of your numbers there in terms of sort of how things have been tracking, but pretty common to see in endurance performance. The detraining is a big one. We want to avoid it as best we can. There's a few strategies you can use. So keep the questions coming in, guys. I know we've got sort of 7 of us in here now. My screen over to this side is telling me 4, but my screen over to this side is telling me 7. So I've got it up just to make sure everything's working. I've got my software here telling me some different numbers. So I know we have a few more in here. It'd be great if we can bring some more. So if you want to get some more discussion happening, hit the share button down below. Pass the link on to someone else you might think would be interested. As I mentioned right at the beginning, some of you might have missed. I want to try and keep tonight a little bit shorter. We might sort of end things about 10 past 8. So another sort of 20 or so minutes. Keep it short, sharp. We did have to start a little bit late tonight, and I apologise for that. But next week we'll revert back to that 7 p.m. Where practical week on week. Obviously next week we are starting to get close to Christmas, so I will probably still do a live stream the week after Christmas because I know Christmas falls on sort of a weekend this year. I will try to do the live stream. I'll update everyone if I'm not going to be doing that though. I'll definitely be doing one next week. It's just a case of the week after. We'll see how we go in that sort of Christmas week. It is my week off work, so I'm going to try and get out and just have a bit of fun in that week as well. But I'll probably still get the live stream up, so we'll keep you posted if there are any changes in that. Coming back to that point we're touching on about a bit of detraining, things like that, and moving into maybe I guess a different part of that conversation. Still a bit restricted in terms of high intensity and speed due to my foot. I could do some 1 hour comfortably hard sessions. Do you think that's a good idea? It really depends on what. I mean, the last thing you'd want to do is go out and be in pain for any reason. So if there's any pain associated with your running, I probably wouldn't be doing much there. Definitely sort of get that recovered up as best we can and go through that repair process. Maybe go see a physio if you need to. in terms of making sure you still get some of that intensity, and like I said, use some of those cross training methods. Maybe use a bike session, maybe use a swimming session. Do something else that's still going to get the heart rate up there. If you're feeling pain in those high intensity efforts, I wouldn't be going and pushing that more. Use that alternative route, and also maybe drop. But then think about how much the volume is going to be doing as well. If you're saying you could do some 1 hour comfortably hard sessions, I would. That to me, if you were able to get through an hour of comfortably hard, that kind of says to me maybe sort of zone 2 tempo type range. Let me know if I'm wrong there. But if you're able to do an hour of running and not have any issues, I would suspect that there's probably you're probably okay to bring in some of the high intensity. That would suggest that there isn't much wrong there, and maybe it could just be a little bit of fatigue. So give yourself a bit of time, do a bit of extra in terms of your recovery. Make sure you're nice and loose, you're mobile, doing some mobility, maybe some foam rolling, working on some of those recovery strategies just to get everything loosened up. The calf could be a bit tight, that's causing a bit of foot pain. I know I had that a couple of weeks ago now. I boosted up my volume. It was one of the biggest weeks I'd done in a little while, and I actually started to feel what kind of felt a bit sort of plantar fasciitis like. The underside of my foot was feeling a little bit sore and not great. What I did was I just pushed back my next run by 1 day, which one day difference isn't going to make the world of difference. I still did a cycling session as almost a substitute in that time. But I just went through and made sure, just double checked on my calves. Sure enough, my calves are super tight. My hamstrings are a bit tight. My glutes are also tight. So I just went through a process of just relaxing and releasing a bit of that. And that actually helped it. And that's completely eliminated all of that issue. So if it is a bit of that, I would probably just go through that process. If you can do an hour comfortably hard, I would think in theory that you're probably okay to be able to do some high intensity. It's the type of thing though that if you still have some pain, if it's only during those high intensity sessions, that's a bit of an interesting one. But if it's during if you're getting still a bit of pain but you're able to tolerate it, it's just a lesser pain through those comfortably hard sessions, I would probably really consider how much volume you're doing. I cut the sessions down and really reduce the amount of work you're doing. Because again, pain is something we want to avoid there. I wouldn't necessarily be pushing it too hard. Hopefully that gives you a bit of an answer on that one. When I say it's a bit vague for me to answer, because without going the ins and outs of what that injury is, or what might be going on, it's a bit difficult to then understand exactly what the process should be in terms of returning to running. How badly is it? Is it a niggle? Is it an actual injury? Is it muscular related, tendon related? Is it a plantar fasciitis type thing? Is it potentially more down the stress fracture line? Those all vary quite differently in terms of the prescription of training that or the process I might then start to suggest and take you through. So probably best point of call would be looking at a physio. Pain due to, I've just seen it here, and I apologize to the guys who've just left some questions in there. I'll come back to you in a second. Pain due to landing on the forefoot, which happens at high speed. Yeah, okay. So if it's something to do with that, it potentially just needs a little bit of respite from that. So maybe just cutting a bit of the volume out could be a good one. Reducing a bit of the volume just to make sure that subsides and then get back into it. As a result, you might have to cop a little bit of a hit of some of that detraining aspect. If that pain continues, I'd be going and seeing a physio or someone to make sure that things are okay. Making sure that there's no structural damage in there. Because if there is, then we're in a few more issues than just sort of trying to work through a niggle. If it starts to subside, that pain starts to subside in some of those sessions, it's the type of thing, like I said, maybe in some of those longer runs, just add in some stride throughs just to sort of test it and see how it goes, just some short, sharp stuff. And then you can progress back in the high intensity, and you're just going to have to cop a bit of that detraining hit, unfortunately, if that's kind of the case. As I mentioned, it's quite, those things can become quite complex in terms of how we go about it. So the actual diagnosis then becomes really critical. What type of niggle or injury you're actually talking about here. Moving into our next ones, as I mentioned before, members do get priority. So Aaron, I'm going to jump to your question first, and I'll come back to the other guys who have left some questions in there. Bit of a random question about, are there any studies you've heard regarding vision and performance? I know it affects my cornering when cycling, but I feel like it makes a difference in running too. Couple of things we could probably talk about here, and I think, and let me know if I'm sort of heading down the right track of where you were suggesting the question. mean vision as in short-sighted. I've just seen that second part pop up there. Autocorrect butchered your comment. That's a killer for everyone. But as in short-sighted, I haven't particularly looked too much into the vision side of things for things like endurance performance. Obviously, in cycling, it's going to make a difference. As you said, it affects your cornering. Feels like it makes a difference to running as well. I think in terms of the visual aspect of things like balance, obviously makes a difference. If you've ever tried to stand on one foot, with your eyes open and try to maintain your balance, it's pretty easy. You go through that same process, but close your eyes. It's a lot harder to maintain your balance because the visual input is a lot of what then coordinates our movement in space, and when I say space and time, in the environment around us. The visual aspect of that makes a huge difference. So I can imagine in things like running, being able to continue in a straight line is the fastest way to go in endurance performance instead of zigzagging. I mean, it's the classic case of if you watch any kids swimming event, like ages 8 to 9, you see the one kid who jumps in and loses his goggles on the dive because his goggles aren't too tight, zigzags down the pool. He's not going to be as fast as a kid who swims dead straight, is he? I mean, it's going to take longer to get there. Same for our open water swimmers. It's hard to keep that dead straight course, but whoever can keep it dead straight usually has best chance of swimming the fastest time because we're covering the least amount of distance. And I mean, if the visual aspect is causing you to drift a little bit, particularly when you're running, I can imagine that's going to make a difference to your performance because we're covering more ground than what we absolutely have to. From a cycling perspective, obviously the cornering aspect, just the spatial aspect in terms of where you are in relation to other people can be just a safety issue. You don't want to clip legs or trip over anyone when you're running. Cycling, you obviously don't want to be touching wheels with anyone in and around you as well. All those types of things are going to be sort of critical. But like I said, a lot of that is going to come down to just the coordination and balance as a result of the input of the visual aspect. That's going to impact a range of things, impact your running technique, not just zigzagging, but maybe a bit of balance in terms of what you experience do you experience something different? You can't actually visually see it, because I know if I deliberately manipulate my technique to make it a bit awkward, I can see the change of where I'm moving. If you can't actually detect that or pick that up, well, maybe that's going to be impacting your economy. On the bike as well, if you're not able to pick up that you're starting to ride and sort of drift in that regard, or you're not able to sight something particularly in the pool or out in the open water, you're not able to sight the buoy directly. I mean, that's where we're going to see maybe a bit of a difference. Like I said before, though, I haven't really read into too much of studies looking at that. Might be something for me to go away and look into, though, because I think it's an interesting topic to talk about. Largely, though, endurance is that's really the only thing I can think of. I mean, largely endurance isn't necessarily decision making based. There are some decisions to an extent, but most of that's controlled for us. It's just a case of get from A to B. We're not necessarily having to choose a path to take or things like that. That's all determined prior. So it's a type of thing that, I mean, from that aspect, the vision's not going to be as important because you're not having to take in and respond to stimulus, but there is a little bit of that aspect to just make sure that we are getting the most effective, most efficient performance, which is usually just the path of our performance, so how straight we can work. Interesting point, though. Really interesting point. Definitely a topic that I might go away and do some investigating on and see what I can find. I'll keep an eye on it for you. And if you do find anything yourself through your own research, send it through. Happy to sort of see what you're finding and how it sort of pertains to your particular. I obviously, sort of you mentioned short-sighted. We might see some very different things for long-sighted. Not too sure. That'd be an interesting comparison to see how it might impact performance overall. Does it significantly impact our coordination? Does it have no effect? Could have no effect. In which case, bonus for you. But as you mentioned, obviously, if it's affecting your cornering, you're feeling that, it's probably is going to make a difference in the long run. Get to these couple of questions now. Sorry, thanks for waiting, guys. But again, members do get our priority in our chats when we do get questions come through from the members. You'll notice their badge next to their name in the chat. And Aaron's one there, the pink badge. He's one of our members who's been on for a little bit longer than that first month. So one of our original members, or if not our first member, I believe, on the channel. So appreciate the support for the channel there. And if anyone wants to join up and get one of those little badges, get some priority in the chat. We do have a couple of new perks coming at 10 members, which is only 3 people away. So all it takes is 3 of you to join up and get involved. and we're going to see things jump up in terms of the perks available as part of being a channel member. Moving into some of our other questions. Trying to keep my daily training while on holiday so I don't lose too much. Still had to take a 6-day break, and heart rate was 10 beats per minute higher for all my paces. Hot day though. Coming back to that discussion we had on detraining before, absolutely you're going to see your heart rate higher on a hot day. That's another consideration you need to make. Trying to keep that training over a holiday is also a little bit tricky, because obviously you want to go and just take a bit of relaxation, restoration time a bit, and taking a 6-day break, you're going to see it down. I would largely say that majority of that 10 beats per minute higher is coming from the heat. I don't want to put an exact set of numbers, but I would probably say at least sort of 7 beats per minute out of that 10 you're experiencing is probably heat related. 3 beats per minute over a 6-day period, probably 3 or so beats per minute from a detraining aspect if you did nothing. If you were maintaining a little bit, that's also minimizing that gap. So largely heat's probably going to play a bit of a role, depending on how hot it was. That's what I would expect, but the detraining can sort of kick in. So just make sure you get something in there. And that's why I say short and sharp is really good, particularly when you're on holidays. You might not want to spend the time out there training. Just go do something short and sharp. It'll be a good way to maintain as much of your physiology as you can. Great question here from Caleb. Thanks for asking about how the testing's going. Now that we are back testing, we've been testing for just over a month and a bit now. Getting close to testing my VO2 and lactate, both bike and run, to see if I can beat values from last year. Definitely keen to see you come back and do some testing. Be keen to see sort of how you go. But yeah, testing's going really well. We've had plenty of athletes through. About to wrap up sort of next week before Christmas, as I mentioned before, and then we'll be closed. We'll be closed in our lab until the 4th of Jan. We'll be back there. Plenty of public holidays that week after Christmas, because Christmas falls on a weekend, and then we got New Year's. We'd only actually be in there based on working non-public holidays. We'd only be in there 2 days out of that week. So it's the type of thing that things have been going really good. It's been great to see people again. Had athletes start to come in, being able to travel to come back in. Had an athlete come down from Sydney, which was nice as well over the weekend. So it's good to be back, looking at data again, and just sort of and keeping up to date with how athletes have been going over this year. And the other exciting thing as well is having athletes back in and testing also means we're going to have some races coming up soon. So Geelong 70.3 is the big one that a lot of athletes are working towards, particularly cyclists as well, working towards 3 Peaks is a big event in Victoria. Alpine Classic, a couple of those. It'd be good to start to see the triathlon series kick off in terms of our sprint and Olympic distance racing athletes as well. And then hopefully we'll start to get back into more of the running-based events and marathons and things like that. We'll start to come back early 2021 as well. So all of that's been pretty exciting. It's good to just check in with athletes and see people in person more than anything. With some of the restrictions easing, it's a little bit nicer than just talking to everyone via either a setup like this virtually or jumping on a phone call and things like that. It's good to have athletes back in the lab and doing some testing and sitting across the desk from them. So that's all been really good over the last little while. Coming back to Aaron's point on and his question around the vision side of things, even when solo, I feel like I can push myself harder because I'm not going to get surprised by hazards. Could just be a mental thing. I think that definitely comes down to it. Obviously, if you can't see a hazard coming in front of you, like for example, you're sitting in a pack, and I was in a pack the other week, riding down the beach. We're sitting at the back of the pack because there were people I didn't know, and I was sort of just being a bit cautious. Sure enough, people went down in front of me. About 8 or so people all went over the top of each other in a group of about sort of 12, 14 people. I was lucky enough to be able to hit the brakes in time and stop, but most went over the top and sort of crashed. Can happen when you're out on the road riding a pack, and if you can't see that hazard, likely if I hadn't have seen that as early as I did, I wouldn't have been able to stop in time and hit the brakes. So it's the type of thing that, yeah, I mean, riding by yourself when you don't necessarily have to worry about that, or when you're running, if you're not running with anyone, you don't have to negotiate things like that, can obviously then make a bit of a difference to your performance, because you just feel probably safer. You feel like you're able to push harder and not have to worry about that possibility of things going wrong. When that is there, obviously you can hold yourself back, and that's a natural instinct. I mean, I've felt that before when I'm in a pack, for example, riding on the weekend. No crashes, but there was a group that went past that we were going to sit on the back of. Me and the guys I was riding with, we were going to sit on the back of them and get sort of taken up through the headwind to make it a little bit easy for us. There was a couple of guys that then sort of rolled into that group as we went past them that were a little bit sort of sketchy and a bit shaky, and I wasn't too sure and whether they were going to cause any issues or not. So we just decided to drop back and just avoid that hazard. And what it meant was we gave them a bit of room, and then we could go about the rest of our riding and work harder because we felt a bit safer doing it. So that's not even just having a vision sort of, I guess, deficiency there. That's just playing things smart and keeping yourself upright on the bike more than anything. But definitely the vision side of things will play a role in performance metrics, but also if you feel like you can just push harder because you feel a bit safer, because you know what's happening, you're a bit more in control of what's happening, or you're sort of taking charge, if you like, if you're sitting at the front of the pack versus at the back, that definitely will obviously push things up. Like you said, even if it's just a mental thing, you're just not restricting yourself because you know what's going to happen. And that's a big thing we see in the lab as well, when athletes have the mask on, particularly on the treadmill. When they have the mask on, they can't necessarily see their feet. Something we do notice a lot is some athletes may not push themselves the first time they go through the test, may not push themselves as hard as they possibly can because they're just a bit unsure about where the sides are and where they can grab, and they're not quite sure about, is the harness going to catch me, things like that. All of that can be overcome just by practicing the test a few more times and getting used to running on a treadmill, used to running with the mask on. We see them come in the second time, they push themselves significantly faster because they know that they're in that safe environment. So that's the type of thing we're talking about, not uncommon at all. And definitely something that, whenever you feel safe and comfortable is going to be where your best performance is, because you're more relaxed, you're not stressed, you're not worrying about other things, you're a lot more focused on the task at hand, which is just putting out power on the bike or running fast or whatever it might be. All of those things are made a little bit easier because it's one less thing to worry about. You're not splitting focus, if you like. There's a little bit less anxiety, heart rate's going to come down as a result. There's a whole bunch of positive side effects of being a bit more relaxed and in control. So by all means, you're sort of hitting the nail on the head of what we would expect when you are maybe a little bit more nervous, a bit anxious as a result of your vision not being able to sort of, I guess, keep you out of trouble, so to speak. If we take out that factor, well, yeah, it's one like I said, one less thing to worry about, so that's a bonus. But yeah, great point touching on vision, because it's an interesting sort of discussion. I'm sure a lot of athletes sort of have to work through it. I know plenty of athletes who either need to wear glasses or wear contacts, particularly in what I do in terms of umpiring football. I know a few guys who wear contacts out on the field because they can't wear glasses out in the field. They wear contacts so they can see, and that's something. If something went wrong with one of their contacts, it's a significant impact to their performance because they need to be able to see to make decisions. So in terms of what happens in front of them, free kicks, the works, it's the type of thing that, that's going to be significant there for an endurance athlete. We're not doing those types of things, but it's more than, particularly on a bike, it's more a safety issue rather than being able to have a performance as a result. Or, well, the performance side of things is moving side to side, but like I said, it's kind of a blend of safety and performance in one. Interesting discussions there tonight, guys. If there is any other questions, happy to take them before we do wrap up. Like I said, I might sort of keep this one a little bit shorter and sort of finish up soon. So if we do have another question you want to send through, feel free. Otherwise, if there isn't anything else that pops up while I just sort of wrap things up here, we will end it there. As always, live stream is available as a replay, so you can go back and watch what you might have missed at the start. A few things, a few people were jumping in. We touched on talking about the couple of videos that have been up on the channel recently, talking about what happens with the data side of things and where we're going with that. Doing some more videos where I'm showing you and screen sharing the data, talking through it, taking you through my process of understanding what do we need to look for in the data as well, and some of the physiology behind it. So go check those videos out. As always, continue to share the channel and share the videos. We're very, very close. I think we're less than 20 subscribers away. If you have a look down below, I think it's 2.48k subscribers on the channel. I think we're less than 20 away from getting to 2.5, which would be awesome if we get it by the end of the year. I know we've sort of got about half a month or sort of 1.5 weeks, 2 weeks left in the year. If we can get that up to 2,500, that'd be awesome if we could get there. And it's only going to take a few of you who've watched tonight to share the videos or share the channel with one other person, and then to them to hit subscribe, and we'll be there in no time. So very, very close to hitting that. We might get to Caleb's question, and then we'll wrap it up. Just a curious thought. Do you find that the best triathletes in the world are generally the best runners in the sport? Interesting point, because in theory you would think yes. And I think I probably agree with that statement to an extent. I typically find best triathletes overall typically be a little bit better running. Why? Because we end on the run. You can be the best cyclist in the world, but if you blow up and someone runs you down, you're still going to lose the race, aren't you? You have to be a strong runner to be able to finish the race well, and that's where you're gonna, I guess, you're gonna make or break your race. You blow up by the run, you're losing a bunch of time. You have a really good run, you're gaining a bunch of time. I think generally speaking, the best runners if we look at who are the best runners versus who are the best cyclists, they typically will win out. You obviously can't be slacking in the others though. So the interesting thing to look at is someone like Lionel Sanders, for example. He's a really strong cyclist. You would have seen this at the PTO event the other week. Really strong cyclist. He's a pretty solid runner, but he swims not great. That puts him at a big disadvantage because his others, his other sports, I guess, are on par, maybe slightly better. Like his bike is on par with anyone else, and his run, there's probably guys who can run quicker than him, but he's so far behind in the swim that he has to make up ground on the bike, and then it's sort of all a bit too little too late. Whereas, and I mean, Cal, you just mentioned there that last 3 winners in Kona have run 2:40 or better. That's where the big part of the race is. I mean, you look at them in Kona, majority of them are coming out similar time of the swim. They're all working off each other on the bike, and then the run really is the splitting factor. Mainly because it is the last part of the event, and that's where most people are really hitting the fatigue aspect. We're in the hottest part of the day when it comes to Kona as well. If you can't run quickly, it's going to be an uphill battle. Where it differs though is the really elite runners, the guys who are running the fastest marathon times, might have the fastest running split. If they're too far behind on the bike, you obviously have to leave yourself that ability to be able to run people down if you are a bit behind on the bike. So leaving too big of a gap isn't ideal, but making sure that you are making sure you're there and thereabouts on the bike is good enough. I think in the shorter distance racing, we see it particularly in ITU events, the Olympic distance type stuff. It becomes a running race. You have a look at those. Everyone comes out of the swim at basically the same time. Everyone is riding in the same pack because it's draft legal. So as long as you sit in that pack, it then becomes who can run the fastest 10K at the end of the race. In which case, the best runners do win. You have a look at all the guys who have won over that period. I mean, Brownlee was a dominant force for a long period of time. Great runner. You have a look at Gomez, great runner. Mario Mola's a solid runner. All of these guys who win ITU events, incredible runners. Even looking back at the Commonwealth Games a few years ago, Jake Birtwistle, former track background, I mean, gun runner. So it's the type of thing that, yes, it makes a significant difference in terms of triathlon. But do we still, it's not, you can't just be a good runner. Obviously, you have to have the other two. But I think when everything's equal, if swimming and cycling is equal, if you're a better runner than someone else, I mean, of course, that's going to make a huge difference at the end. Even if you come off the bike, particularly in Ironman, if you're 5 minutes or 10 minutes down on someone, but you can make up 15 minutes, well, you've won the race, haven't you? So, typically speaking, the guys who are really solid runners are going to have a much better day of it. The guys who are good cyclists can still win, but you got to finish strong if you want to be up there and competing, particularly at the highest level. You got to have a good run leg. If you don't have a good run leg, you're giving up too much time, and no matter how good of a cyclist you are, someone will run you down. That's kind of just the nature of it. So hopefully that sort of answers the question there. My thoughts on that anyway. Everyone's going to have a slightly different opinion, but I definitely see that majority of the time that the really good runners are slightly better athletes than the guys who are maybe a bit more cycling dominant and have an okay run. Usually that's the way it swings. The better runners will sort of win out. Great live stream again tonight. I might leave it there because we just sort of ticked over 8 o'clock, and like I said, I want to keep tonight a little bit shorter because I do have a few things I just quickly need to tick off before I finish up for the night and go to sleep. But thanks again for jumping in and joining. As I mentioned before, we're 3 members away from 10, and 10 members on the channel by hitting that join button down below if you want to join up and become a member of Team NJ Sports Science. When we get to 10, I'm dropping a new perk, and so there's a couple of things in the works to do with some deals that I might be working at the moment. I don't want to announce too much about that right now. There's a few things I'm thinking of doing and working out the logistics of. But once we do get to 10, that'll be when I start to announce the next perk, and we'll start to work from there and build in more perks. So there will be things coming. $2.99 a month. It's less than a coffee a month to help support this channel grow. And there are going to be some additions that you're going to get as a bonus of being a part of that membership. That are above and beyond just being a subscriber and getting the great content on the channel. Yes, have some extra privileges that aren't going to be available to the rest of the people who watch the content as well. So some good things to look out for there. Make sure you do continue to pass on the videos. Keep subscribing to the channel. I appreciate the support. Keep the questions in the comments coming in all the videos. Absolutely appreciate it as always. I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for joining us on the live tonight. As always, replays are going to be up later. So if you are watching this, hopefully you enjoyed it as well. I'll leave the time codes down the bottom on the replay if you are keen on rewatching it in the future as well. And that'll help you skip through. But again, thanks for joining us tonight. Looking forward to the rest of the videos coming the rest of this week and our live stream next week. We'll see you then. We'll leave it there. And yeah, thanks for joining us.